Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the next episode of the BRIO in the Box podcast. What are we going to talk about today?
Today we're about halfway through our No Shit November. So we're going to do a little, what we've learned so far.
Summary of the takeaways.
Shock.
So No Shit November, the nutrition challenge of just trying not to eat any ultra processed food, but then also mostly the book club of reading the book Ultra Processed People by Chris Van Tilliken. It's going great.
Yeah.
Lots of people are doing it.
I think our goal was 10 pages a day. And I think a lot of people are like almost done the book. And
Couldn't put it down.
Yeah. It's halfway through the challenge. So it's a shocking, alarming book for sure.
So I would say in the first couple of weeks, the primary reaction, people will come into the gym and be like, what? They're just like mad. They're incensed. They're like irate that this stuff has been happening and they're just finding out about it. And shock and awe, I think, has been the major reaction so far.
There was a lot of people discussing the coal-based butter that the Germans made as part of a goal to be self-sufficient. They were taking their like old coal, like energy processing stuff, and they turned it into a semi-edible food that they were giving to people, and they were getting super sick and dying from it. But they're like, yeah, we're self-sufficient. Most
of the processed fats are the result of some kind of like industrial byproduct.
Yeah.
Right? Cottonseed oil. A byproduct of the cotton manufacturing industry became like an engine lubricant. And then they went, hey, what if we like hydrogenated this and maybe we could pass it off as butter?
Yeah. Coal butter is way worse though. Cause that's like a rock from the ground. It's like drinking gasoline. Like,
basically
it's not
spreadable gasoline, put it on toast. Great. Yeah. So I think people were like shocked to find out what all is going into their food. The exercise of just looking at the ingredients has been, I think, really useful. That would be the main point of this thing. People got a little hung up on like, well, what does this count or does that count? And if you'll notice, I have not answered a single one of those questions with a specific yes or no. I want you to come to the answer yourself, right? I'm not going to give you this list of like black and white, this good, this bad.
Yeah.
I want you to look at it and you to figure it out and maybe ask yourself which additives to your food are you comfortable having in you and which ones do you think you would benefit most from avoiding and that kind of stuff. So I've tried to avoid the specific answers to all the, is this allowed? Is that allowed? It's not a like allowed or not allowed thing. It's about you learning about what the heck is in your food.
Yeah. It's not supposed to be like for 30 days, you just don't eat anything processed. And then afterwards you just continue on eating processed food. It's supposed to be like a learning experience and you need to be more aware of what you're putting into your body. And then down the road, if you decide I really enjoyed this one thing, and for me, this is my thing that's worth it, then cool. You make a choice based on the information you have. Yeah. The problem is that most people were going through their day having no idea what they were putting into their body. So this whole thing has been a pretty good eye-opening experience.
Yeah. And I think what people are realizing is you start trying to explain this to someone else that's not as informed and you sound like a tinfoil hat wingnut.
For sure. Yep.
You're like, the dietitians are paid off by Coca-Cola and blah, blah, blah. Except none of this is a conspiracy theory. None of this is a secret. Nobody had to leak this information. All that information is publicly available. It's like you go to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics in the US and it, like on their website, they say where they get their funding for their conferences and stuff from. This is not a secret. Who's on the board of this or that and paid by the sugar industry. And they have to disclose it in the papers, like their conflicts of interest, or it's just publicly available. You can look on their LinkedIn page and see who they've been employed by or taken money from. So all of this, like one of the girls in the gym was like, they're not even trying to hide it.
Yeah.
No, not at all. It's not even remotely a conspiracy. There's no attempt to censor that information or hide it whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's out there in plain sight. The ingredients of what's in the food, it's on the package, right? This whole thing, this whole grift relies on people being passive and not paying attention.
Yeah. There was a few studies that he referred to where the people involved had to disclose their conflicts of interest and they would often be like, well, I used to do this, but I don't anymore. And then when you would actually look, they were still doing whatever, they were still involved with Coca-Cola or Nestle or whoever. Yeah. And then I remember at one point him saying that for every 10 people that Coca-Cola or whatever company it was does disclose, there was like 50 other people that they didn't talk about. So, it's all out there, but you do have to dig a little bit to kind of get the real information because it's not that they're lying. They're just not sharing the full truth.
Yeah. But I mean, it's available, investigative reporters, journalists like Chris Van Tilliken's a doctor, but people that write books and they find it and there's articles and it's fairly publicly available. And it's not, when it comes out, it barely makes a blip.
Yeah.
You know, barely hits the radar of like media and that kind of stuff. I don't know if we all just go, well, yeah, of course. If a study is showing that sugar is fine, so you could just be like, pretty sure and know who paid for that study.
Yeah. That's the big problem with all of it is 10-second media, right? You'll read a headline and you'll be like, oh, turns out sugar's not that bad for you.
Yeah.
And then think nothing else of it, that you just read the headline. Like, study shows that sugar is okay. And
fiber is good for me. Red meat is bad for me.
No further information. No further considering or looking into anything. You have to look more than the headline. You just have to do your research.
Yeah, for sure. So as much as you have to be cautious about headlines and things you see in the media about what's good for you or what's bad for you, if you're just evaluating food by food, all the information, pretty much all the information you need is right there. It's just in the small print under the ingredients. It's not on the splashy front of package marketing.
Yeah.
And the whole thing relies on you just never flipping the box over and looking at what it is. So you pick up the thing at Costco that says made good and you go, this must be good. And then you never flip it over to realize that sugar is the first ingredient.
Yeah.
Or 5 types of sugar, you know?
It's the whole you can't judge a book by its cover thing,
Yes.
right? Like you can't believe the marketing. You can't believe what they show you. You have to look at what's actually there. And it's funny how many people have talked about how much longer they spend in the grocery store now that they're like turning everything over and looking at the ingredients. It's a lot of fuck and then put it back. And fuck, put it back.
So I think that's like of the shock and awe. That's the next thing is like, you can't eat anything.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, basically anything in a package or a box that's a big red flag. It's hard to find something in a package or a box or jar or can that is food.
Yeah.
There's some for sure, but it's like 5 to 10% of it. And the rest is not. The rest is ultra processed food.
A long time thing now has been like shop the perimeter of the grocery store, right?
Yeah.
Where you avoid the aisles of all the like processed
Shelf stable
stuff and the freezer items. But it's funny, like even in the perimeter, like there's still ultra processed foods, right? You
The
still
bakery.
have to, yeah. Well,
You gotta skip the bakery.
That's what's funny about you walk into Sobeys and like immediately to your left is like all the baked goods. But yeah, like you even go into the dairy area and a lot of people were struggling to find milk products that didn't have some sort of stabilizer or emulsifier or whatever. But they're there. You just have to like look for them. You just got to compare.
And I think that's the thing, this exercise of just look. And then you're like, oh, I've been doing a bunch on the BRIO Plus Nutrition Instagram of, hey, just buy this one and not that one. These are the same sour cream, but this one has carrageenan and locust bean gum in it. So you buy this one that doesn't.
Yeah.
Or this cream has a bunch of shit in it, this one doesn't. And you just start to learn which things should go in your grocery cart. So it's to some extent less of a bunch of things you can't eat. Obviously like Doritos and pizza pops and granola bars and all that kind of shit that's not food, but like cereal, you can skip that whole aisle.
Yeah.
You know? But you're just like, oh, I just learned which things. I'm going to buy this cheese, not that one. I'm going to buy this yogurt, not that one. And then the shopping gets easier as you just get in the role of the main things you restock your grocery cart with every week and which items you gravitate towards. So, but it takes some learning in the beginning to figure it out.
Like we said right from the beginning, I think your best bet is just to prioritize single ingredient items. Right?
Then you don't have to do that.
There's if it comes in a box and there's a bunch of ingredients, you're like, well, this could be terrible. It's probably not what I'm looking for. Like, I'm just going to pick the potatoes instead, or I'm going to pick the meat or whatever. Simplify, you know?
Yeah. If you don't want to go through that whole exercise of standing in the grocery store for 2 hours reading the ingredients, then just buy meat, vegetables, eggs, butter, and then combine yourself into food.
I think the other learning for a lot of people, if they haven't already, is going to be that you need to learn to prepare and cook, because a lot of people have been gravitating to the easy grab and go stuff like hard-boiled eggs. There's been a lot of people talking about eating a lot of hard-boiled eggs, which is like fine. And if you love hard-boiled eggs, that's great. Yeah. If I ate nothing but hard-boiled eggs, I would get real sick of hard-boiled eggs. Yeah. So you have to learn to enjoy the process of making yourself food and get creative sometimes and try to just think of some stuffs to make it sustainable. Because if you just go hard on one thing for a month and then you're over it and you have no other options, then you're going to end up falling back off the wagon. So I think that part of using ingredients is you have to prepare something. Yeah.
And I think you have to cook.
Yeah.
It's just a given. If you want to be an optimal person, live a healthy life, maintain good health, for as long as you're alive, you're just going to have to cook at home. It's just how it is. Everyone has now seen the state of the average food item out there. Yeah. And we just have to return to the lost art of cooking. Yeah. It was a way that humans sustained themselves for, millennia, millions of years, basically since we emerged. It's like a natural part of being a human, really. It's a unique element of being a human. we learned to control fire about 1.8 million years ago. There's a great paper, actually, I think I linked to it in one of the days, that they proposed that humans are the only, they call them cucinivores.
Cucinivore, like
Yeah, as in like cooking.
Okay.
Yeah, as in that the human digestive system extends outside of ourselves, and that we semi-digest food that we eat by cooking it first. So
Right.
fermenting and sprouting and grinding and boiling and roasting and all these things are like an extension of our digestive system. And it's really what made us human. Like the ability to control fire and extract more nutrients from the environment is what makes us human. So I think the more you cook, you connect with your humanity.
Yeah. And if you think like way back before agriculture, I mean, those people did not have very much variety in their
No.
food at all. They basically had what they could get, right? So it was a lot of the same stuff over and over and over again. So, you know, if you're better off just like having a routine and sticking to like your 6 or whatever different items, then great.
That's much more natural.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that as far as you don't need a super diverse amount of food. Yeah. But if you are the type of person that enjoys eating and you like to, you know, try different things, you got to get creative. You got to find a way to make it happen and do it yourself.
Yeah. I think someone had asked, and I made a post about, okay, how do you keep your kids off ultra processed food without just spending your entire life meal prepping?
Yeah.
And as an extension of that, you have to teach yourself to cook, and then you have to teach that skill to your kids as early as possible. And then it becomes a family thing that you do together. It should not be you're preparing meals and they're out playing sports or they're in the basement playing video games or something. It's a thing you do together. That's an essential life skill that they're going to need to know. I see a lot of people, I think people feel this pressure to give their kids all these opportunities to presumably set them up for a good life. And they're in music and they're in dance and they're in 5 sports and they're doing all these things. And then I always think, but did you forget to have dinner together? You know, COVID, when everything went on pause, was kind of a big reset for people that like, oh, maybe this cult of busyness isn't all it's cracked up to be. If your kids are in activity 7 nights a week and that requires you to never cook and throw them a Happy Meal into the back of the minivan, are you really setting them up for a good life? Are those the skills you actually want to teach them? Maybe they could be in activities 4 nights a week and you could cook together some of the other nights and meal prep and just have them grow up in an environment where they understand how to eat real food, what it is. I woke up the other morning. I was downstairs and Dash was upstairs. I'm like, hey buddy, like, come get dressed. He's just, hold on, I'm just finishing something. I'm like, oh God, what is he doing? And I go upstairs and he'd made his lunch already. He had got out, he made himself a taco bowl. So he got out the brick of cheese, shredded a bunch of cheese on the cheese grater himself.
Because we don't buy the shredded
Because we
stuff
no
anymore.
longer buy the shredded cheese with the anti-caking agents on it. We had 3 pounds of ground taco spice ground beef cooked in the fridge. So he got shredded cheese, scooped the ground beef into the bowl. We had rice, a big pile of rice cooked with bone broth. He got that out, made himself a bowl, warmed it up, was putting it into his little thermos thing for lunch. And I was actually like having a moment. I'm so proud right now.
Cutting up some veggies for himself.
Cut
And
him,
stuff.
yeah, the other day I got up and he was cutting up veggies for his lunch. He made himself a little veggie salad thing. And he just like, it wouldn't even occur to him to eat anything else for lunch because he's just it's never been a possibility. There's no box of packaged items in the cupboard to even pick from. There's just food in the house.
Yeah.
And he's 7.
Yeah.
And he can make himself a lunch just fine.
Yeah.
And he likes it. He loves feeling independent. He was so proud of himself that he did it. And he knows how to use a knife to cut vegetables.
And I think like we're kind of ahead of the game because from birth, that's how we've always been with them, right? It's like mostly real food all the time. And then once in a while, we'll let them have ice cream or, you know, cookies or whatever. We'll have some stuff once in a while. So it's not that they're like so strict and they're counting their macros and they're weighing and measuring their food and whatever. They still are kids. They do get little treats here and there, but we've just like from the beginning, but this isn't something we have every day. This is like a treat. And so now they know what to expect. So if you're going from your kids are expecting granola bars and whatever, for sure, there's going to be some time that is a bit of a transition time and it's going to suck and they're going to probably be uncomfortable with it. And, but that's fine. It's like anything. Like when they first go to school, often kids are like, I hate school. I don't want to go anymore. And you're not like, yeah, you're right. We probably don't need to put you in school. No, you have to go to school. Like even though you don't want to, you still have to do it because it's good for you. And, you know, eventually they develop a new routine and then it's just a normal thing. So I think we have to just be willing to do difficult things and be willing to stand up for what's important long-term for our kids and make it just a positive part of their daily routine.
And I think it's pretty clear, ultra processed food is addictive.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
the same nature as other plant-based addictive products. And actually, we were talking about this earlier. What we're watching play out is tobacco 2.0. So the tobacco companies in the 20th century had a plant-based product that was refined into faster to consume, i.e. smoke it, addictive thing with high harm potential. And they marketed it aggressively. They threw cartoon characters on it. They tried to get kids hooked as young as possible. They paid off doctors to endorse it. They did everything they could to obfuscate the research that was showing it was harmful for as long as they could, until basically this gang of corporate criminals, the court system caught up with them and they finally had to stop. So they just pivoted, took all those skills that they had and turned it into another plant-based product with high addiction potential, with high harm potential. And they went, okay, we can't do that as much with tobacco anymore. We'll do it with wheat, sugarcane, and soybeans. Cool, no problem. And so they took everything they knew about concentration and speed of delivery and aggressive marketing, and you throw a monkey on the box of Cocoa Puffs and you pay off the dietitians to say it's good for you, and you pay off some politicians to not raise alarm bells and not go after you for as long as possible. And now we're just kind of in the I hope, beginning of people waking up and realizing what's going on. So it's not that the tobacco companies are like the processed food companies. The processed food companies are the tobacco companies, literally. If you go back to the roots of Philip Morris owns Kraft Foods, they've since divested some of that stuff, but they basically just took everything they knew about marketing a plant-based product with high addiction potential and high harm and just pivoted it. And I think what's most appalling for me anyway is how much they've targeted children and how much we've allowed it to work. How on earth did they recruit parents to buy this stuff and readily give it to their kids every day?
You walk down the cereal aisle and it's like a kid's store, you know, like it's nothing but cartoons and like bright, happy colors and prize. I don't know if they still do prizes in the box, but like when we were growing up, like there was toys in the box and games on the back of the box and whatever. That is all just to get your kids to get hooked on this stuff. And they get so hooked. Like name a kid that hasn't had cereal that's not completely hooked on having cereal every morning, you know?
And okay, so eggs used to be the staple for breakfast. Protein, nutrients, vitamins, minerals, cheap, easy, like readily available on most like farms and then later on. But it's kind of a commodity. There's no fancy marketing really surrounding eggs, and they're expensive. The margins for farmers that make animal-based products like that are very slim. But monocrop agriculture, they can take 4 cents worth of wheat or corn or whatever, throw a parrot on the front of the box and tell you it has 22 fake vitamins and minerals sprayed on it and it's got 12 grams of whole grains or whatever bullshit nonsense is on there. Pay a dietitian on Instagram to endorse it. And the worst thing is that people buy it. None of this would work if people didn't buy it. And that's my mission, is the informed consumer, be a savvy consumer. I'm not going after public policy and laws and political kind of stuff. I don't care about that. I just want people to be more empowered to not be a victim, not be a passive, not allow this to happen to you and your family and stuff.
I fully believe that people should be able to take risks. You know, I think the dangerous things should be allowed. You should be allowed to go skydiving. You should be allowed to smoke marijuana. You should be allowed to do these things that are potentially harmful, but you should just know what the risks are. If you showed up to, like, you're going to jump out of a plane and they're like, nobody has ever had a problem with this ever. It's totally safe, 100% guaranteed, totally fine. And then they just shoot you out of the plane. That would be concerning. But when I did it, we spent 4 hours learning about what to do when things go wrong, and learning what the dangers are, and we're learning like how to do the whole thing before they even let us step foot on the plane. So, you know, there just needs to be that level of, I acknowledge that what I'm doing isn't good for me and I'm choosing to do it even though it's not.
It's interesting to combine those two worldviews, where I think what the processed food companies are doing is complete bullshit, but I also don't believe that we should ban it. So I'm not in favor of prohibition of really anything. Prohibition of alcohol didn't work. Drug prohibition is clearly not working. Congratulations to drugs for winning the war on drugs, as we've said before. Tobacco, processed foods, alcohol, all these kinds of things. People should be able to do risky things if they want to, but there should be informed consent. They should be aware of the risks. And it's the marketing of those things that I think needs to be controlled. They can be available, but I don't think we need to slap a cartoon on the front and make it at child's eye level in the grocery store, or advertise during their favorite cartoon or anything like that.
I know it's a discouraging thing. Like, we don't have cable TV, so Dash only ever gets to watch like Netflix or anything once in a while here. But when he does watch TV, it is alarming how the marketing works on young brains, you know, like he'll see something and he's like, you know what we should get? We should get this app called whatever. And be like, dude, like, where did you even hear about that? Like, we need to subscribe to this whatever thing, or we need to buy this candy or this whatever. It's like, man,
because he never sees ads, because we pay for no ads on YouTube and you know, the streaming services and stuff. So he does see it.
I hate advertising. I will happily pay extra to not get any advertising. I will use my privilege to avoid advertising because it drives me crazy.
That's worth it for sure. So I think this whole exercise is, it's just about, I guess, waking up. I hate that term, but just like bringing more awareness, being more bullshit proof, not being passive and allowing it to happen, not just believing what's in the big letters on the front of the box, but turning over that box of Vector that says high protein on the outside and looking at the ingredients and going starch, sugar, 5 types of sugar, vegetable oil, and soy. I think it turns out the most nutritious thing here is the milk that it's served with. That's actually where the protein comes from. So we could throw this in the trash and just drink a glass of milk.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's been a good experiment. Everybody's been super into it.
So you kind of mentioned the whole point of this isn't to just do it for 30 days and then go right back to old habits, right? We're trying to bring awareness, new knowledge. Once you know better, you do better. So I think once we're aware of what this stuff is and aware of its harms, then we have a gray area of how much are you going to allow that into your life or into your house or into your body.
Right.
And you have to decide on what's the basically minimum effective dose for you for you to not feel like you're being deprived or missing out on life. So what's the least number of times in a month or in a year that you're going to eat ultra processed foods so that you don't feel like it's taking away from your quality of life?
Yeah. Yeah. Like for me, I try to be super consistent through the year, and I have some things that I'm cool with, like once a week that I'll let myself have. And then there's other things that I really enjoy, but I try to really minimize how much I eat them, like donuts. I love donuts. I'm a big donut guy. My favorite donuts are Krispy Kreme donuts. And fortunately, there's no Krispy Kreme in Saskatoon, but there is one in Maui. And so usually on one day when we're in our Maui trip, we'll go and get Krispy Kreme donuts.
Once a year.
And then there was when we went to our Jack Johnson concert, they were serving breakfast, quote unquote, and it was donuts. And
this is at the Gorge in Washington.
Yeah, we were camping at the Gorge, and they had like breakfast sandwiches, but they also had donuts. And I was like, you know, I'm on vacation, we're away. And one morning I was like, you know what? I'm going to have a donut for breakfast. It was great. It was delicious. It was a really good donut, and it totally made my whole day feel off. But those.
Do you remember me? I was like, "Are you eating a donut for breakfast?" I was like, "What are you doing?"
And then we worked out immediately afterwards. So I was working out with a donut in my belly, which I don't recommend. Yeah. But it's okay. So twice a year I had a donut, and if you can minimize it that much, then it continues to be special, right? It continues to be like, well, I'm going to have a treat. But if it's every week, you're giving yourself that donut treat, like that's not a treat anymore. That's part of your routine, right? So there's certain things that I usually don't eat very often, that I'll have maybe once a month, or like bread, right? I love sandwiches as well, but I love sandwiches to the point where I have a hard time not eating them all the time. Mm-hmm. So for me, if I do sandwiches once every month or a couple months or whatever, then that's a much, more maintainable thing for me. If I try doing it like weekly, then I run into trouble.
And if we do eat bread, then we look for the actual sourdough with the slow fermentation from the bakery, and it's good, right? It's not just the shelf stable, Dempster's bread off the shelf, right? It's the good, the real deal.
Yeah.
I think with all things that have basically what we're talking about is like addiction potential, other things in society, we've put parameters around for responsible use. So alcohol and other drugs, alcohol's the most harmful by far of all of the drugs. We allow it in society for some reason and not other ones, but we have these like social norms around it. And when we start to go outside the boundaries of those social norms, that's when the red flags start going up about maybe we have a problem. So like generally it's not socially acceptable to drink in the day. Mm-hmm. Generally we tend to contain alcohol to like with other people. Generally we tend to contain it to like once a week or less, special occasions. And when we start to go outside of that, like you're drinking in the morning, you're drinking alone, you're drinking every day. Now we're like, oh, now you've crossed into some addiction, some like red flags where the boundaries have been breached. And I think right now we just have no boundaries whatsoever with ultra processed foods. It's not socially acceptable to give alcohol to your kids, right? It's actually against the law, but you know, there's boundaries of responsible use related to age. Ultra processed foods now, it is like everywhere, all the time, every day, every occasion, every minute of the day, everywhere you go. You know, I travel a ton and I'm always just shocked at everywhere you turn in public is ultra processed foods, chips, candy, sodas, juices. You need to get gas, it's there. You need to go to the grocery store, it's there. You go to the airport, it's there. You go, you know, you're like, I go to rent a car, there's a vending machine with chocolate bars in it. If you really had like a serious processed food addiction, environmental triggers are a big thing, right? So if it's alcohol, you remove yourself. You don't go to the bar. You avoid going to the liquor store. You know, you avoid the alcohol section in Costco and stuff. Like you avoid the triggers, seeing them basically as much as you possibly can. But man, if you had ultra processed food addiction and you were trying to avoid triggers, like fucking good luck. Yeah. You can't go it's everywhere.
Yeah. It's bad out there.
And so many activities, you know, it's like, oh, I want to go watch a movie, junk food.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to get together with my friends, go out for dinner.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to catch up with my buddies, go for beers. It's just amazing how much it's everywhere with no boundaries. There's no safe, responsible use or much of a point where people would go, I think you have a problem.
Yeah.
Here. You know?
And that's the funny thing about food as a problem substance is that when somebody has a cocaine habit or an alcohol habit, their family and friends will usually try to intervene at some point or at least try to help, right?
Yeah.
But when it's a food thing, people just, okay.
Yeah.
You know, they'll take you out for donuts or whatever. They'll be part of the problem.
Yeah. And when people are trying to change for the better, the amount of social pressure they get to not do that.
Yeah.
The crabs in the bucket that try to pull you back down. People
Totally.
Like, you know, dieting is harmful or come on, just one piece of cake or aren't you gonna, whatever. You
it's my birthday. Have cake with me. It's like, you wouldn't say that to a cokehead. You wouldn't be like, we're going club and have some Coke with me. You're like, that's a terrible thing to do.
And I think we also do people with processed food addiction a disservice by trying to push this idea that all food's in moderation.
Yeah.
Like we would not tell an alcoholic that just cut down to like 2 drinks on the weekend and everything will be fine. Like abstention is the foundation of addiction treatment.
Yeah.
We don't try to have them manage sometimes. Certainly there are people out there that can have 1 or 2 drinks and they're completely fine. They never cross over that line into addiction territory. But when you do, abstaining is the primary treatment. So, you know.
Yeah. In our first podcast about this, you said that if you consider something and you're like, oh, there's no way I could live without that. Like that's problem talk, you know, like that's concerning. So, you know, if you're feeling that way about certain things, test yourself. Be like, can I go a day without it? Can I go a week without it? Can I go a month without it? And at least be aware of where you're at with those things. And then at least you're like, again, if you're deciding this is worth it for me and I want to do this, then that's great. But you know, the real situation, you're not like convincing yourself that it's totally fine when it's not totally fine.
Yeah. You're choosing to indulge in those things when you want to, not feeling compulsively that you have to. I think like quite a few people asked me about like bubbly water. What about like bubbly water? It's got natural flavors in it.
Yeah.
You're like, well, and again, like I said, I avoided saying strict yes or no. Like, well, if you struggle with real foods don't taste very good, or you tend to eat more than you need, like your appetite is too high relative to your energetic needs and those kinds of things, then you might benefit from doing no flavored anything, artificial or natural flavors of any kind, and just get your palate reacquainted to what real food should taste like and enjoying it.
Yeah.
Or, you know, someone was like, I can't just drink water. It needs to have some flavor in it. That's a red flag. If your palate has been hijacked to the point that water doesn't taste good anymore, I would be drinking nothing but water for a while until that hijacking was reset back to normal. And then if you choose to enjoy a bubbly once in a while, nice and cold on a refreshing treat once in a while, sure. Yeah. But if you're like, I can no longer drink water because it tastes weird, those are some things you might want to consider.
Yeah. And as far as all things go, like bubbly is definitely not the worst, right? Like it's probably fine.
Yeah.
But again, just be aware of where you're at, you know?
Yeah. And I think lots of people, I was always trying to redirect the conversation to don't get caught up in the minutia. Don't get caught up in the nickels when we're trying to pick up $100 bills here. Don't get, forest for the trees kind of thing. If you're already eating mostly real food and things are going great, and I was having a conversation about cashews, like roasted cashews usually have peanut oil on them. So they've subjected to high heat, and that's a seed oil. They do that so the salt sticks to it. But then raw cashews, we got down this rabbit hole of like, but you can't eat a cashew. It's toxic, like directly from the plant. So it has to be cooked to some extent. So then we're like, what's a raw cashew? And it's been steamed.
Right.
Lots of nuts are steamed to open the pods or the seeds of things. So it's been subjected to some heat, but not roasted at high heat. And it doesn't have seed oils. I was like, I feel like if you're making yourself too crazy, I got to the point where I was like, I would just eat meat if it was getting this complicated to decide if I should eat cashews or not. I was like, it's just. And
it's funny because when you have a raw cashew or a raw almond, they're not nearly as good as when you have roasted nuts, right? Like those are delicious, and that's on purpose, right? Yeah. So that you eat more. And for me, cashews are not one of those things where I'll have 3 and I'm good. Like I could eat a whole container of cashews. They're great. They're so delicious.
Yeah.
But if you eat a whole container, that's like a day's worth of food. That is so, those things are so calorie dense and so, easy to eat a ton of them.
Yeah.
Those are one of those things where I abstain for most of the time because it's just, I know it's like a Dorito. As soon as I have one, I want to have more.
And they're one of the few things in nature that are high in both starch and fat.
Yeah.
Very few things come with that combination.
And then add salt to make it more.
And then when they're roasted and added salt, now you have the hyper palatable combo of salt, sugar, fat. That's what gets people to overconsume. And they're high in omega-6.
Yeah.
Not as concentrated high like a seed oil, but nuts are higher in omega-6s, which trigger your endocannabinoid system and give you the munchies, just like cannabis gives you the munchies. So yes, it's a real food or a natural food, but.
And if you're one of those people that can just have a serving, like weighed measured serving and you're good, awesome. Good for you.
Sure.
But I'm not one of those people, so I abstain.
When you just have to know that about yourself.
For sure.
Like trigger foods, or I have no off switch with this thing. And
same with bread. If you can have like a piece of bread or 2 pieces of bread and feel good and you're awesome for the rest of the day, like awesome. Good for you.
Yeah.
I could eat a whole loaf of bread. No problem. A little peanut butter and jam on there. Forget about it. It's like dessert.
We were talking about this yesterday, actually, about like how actual bread is dense and chewy, and the stuff that's in the grocery store. Like a lot of the ultra processed people book was about how soft food is and how little chewing it requires. That it basically is just like passively, it hits your saliva and it's just turned into the sludge and you just swallow it without having to do anything, which is such a gross thought. But actual bread, like if you were to make real bread yourself, it's like dense and chewy. And you probably, once you made your way through 2 slices of that kind of stuff, you just wouldn't want to eat it anymore, or it would be so much work.
Your jaw's fatigued and you're just like, oh man,
so
chew anymore.
The super fluffy, store-bought shelf-stable bread that's like soft beyond measure and full of all the emulsifiers and stabilizers and humectants and everything. That's easy to passively consume way too much.
Yeah. Well, what are those things called? The camping bush pies, where you put some sort of pie filling between 2 pieces of white bread and you roast it over a fire. That's literally dessert. It's delicious. It's super good. But you can't just substitute meat for those pie fillings and still call it it's no longer a dessert. It's just kind of a meat dessert now.
That just made me think of, people will talk about the glycemic index and high GI foods, and it's a measure of how quickly a food raises your blood glucose. White bread is the standard. It's 100 that everything else is benchmarked off of.
It's higher than sugar, isn't it?
Sugar, because sugar is half glucose, half fructose.
Yeah.
The glycemic index of glucose is actually like 70. But white bread, the amylase enzyme in your saliva has cleaved those starch molecules into pure glucose before you even swallow it.
Yeah.
So you're basically just like swallowing this pure glucose paste before it even hits your stomach.
Making a fire out of sawdust. It's just like
basically, yeah. And so much of the takeaway of this book is about the speed of delivery of these things, where it used to be food and then it was subjected to this processing that increases the speed that it can get in you, and the speed that it gets through your digestive system. And I think that's an underappreciated quality that's not reflected in the calories, in the macronutrients, which again, why I think counting macros is stupid, because so much can be obfuscated if you just look at that.
Yeah. And so often you can sit down and eat. Like I eat pretty quick, which is probably not a good thing, but you'll eat and eat and eat. And then all of a sudden, like your belly is just no, like too far. And then you're for like the rest of the night, you're just like, oh my God, I feel terrible now. Right. And so you can consume that stuff so fast that your brain doesn't even have time to like process and be like, okay, like enough, slow down, stop. I remember reading about, it was like way long time ago. It was tips on like how to gain weight as a hard gainer bodybuilder guy. And this one guy recommended getting a large pizza and just dousing it with olive oil. And he said, the key is you have to eat it as fast as possible because you have about 20 minutes before your body's just going to shut down and you're not going to be able to physically get any more into you.
Yeah.
So you need to eat as quickly as possible before your brain can be like, whoa, too full. But like that was the key, right? Just eating fast and eating heavy, high dense food.
Mm-hmm. That's why blended foods like smoothies are different than eating the fruit itself.
Yeah.
Eating an apple is different than eating applesauce, even though. So here's what's interesting, back to the glycemic index. The glycemic index of an apple is lower than apple juice, of course. Apple juice is like juice, so the fiber and the chewing requirements have been taken away. So of course, apple juice, the same amount of carbohydrate, but just in pure liquid form, has a much higher glycemic index. People are like, oh, it's because the fiber has been removed. The fiber slows down absorption of the sugar. But what's interesting, if you take an apple and blend it up into applesauce, the glycemic index is the same as if it was juice.
Mm-hmm. And
the fiber is still there.
Yeah.
The fiber doesn't do anything. The fiber is just a proxy for how processed the food is, but not a perfect proxy. It's not the fiber itself. It's the fiber tends to reflect that that was an apple and not the juice. Mm-hmm. But even if you keep the fiber intact, but you blend it up so you can just like passively absorb it without chewing, it's as if it was juice. Yeah. So and there's a big difference between eating food and then foods that don't require chewing. Yeah. And what we were just talking about this before. I don't know if people have seen the headlines, those like squishy applesauce packets. There's a huge problem with lead poisoning in children from those things right now. There's 3 different brands that have been recalled due to high lead content. Like 22 toddlers have suffered lead poisoning and God knows how many others. Mm-hmm. Lead, there's no safe amount of lead exposure. It can cause behavioral problems. It can cause like mental retardation, growth issues, tremendously toxic to the brain. And now they're finding out what's the source of these things. They're manufactured in Ecuador. They're imported into the US. Apples are being blended up and packaged in a third world country with maybe less stringent food safety requirements. They're imported. What the fuck? Can't a kid just eat an apple? Yeah. Why does it have to be in a little squishy packet? Just eat an apple. Yeah. No kid on earth needs to suck on a little squishy packet of chewed up apples. And just eat an apple.
Even the, fast consumption aside, even just not chewing is super bad for kids' jaw development and their like facial structure and stuff. So you're way better off across the board just eating an apple than having a apple in a squishy bag.
Literally, it'll make your kids better looking.
Yeah.
If they chew instead of suck down all their calories. There's a great book on that called Jaws, and it's written by, I can't remember their names, but one is a evolutionary biologist and one is a professor of dentistry, I think, from Stanford School of Medicine, I want to say. So it's these 2 people, kind of interesting backgrounds that teamed up to write this book. And it's basically on the epidemic of underdevelopment of the jaw and crooked teeth and tooth decay that we just take as normal, that every kid should have braces when that is absolutely not normal whatsoever. And it's a direct result of the food supply, the things that kids are fed.
Too much soft
food and lack of essential nutrients. Lack of K2. The fat-soluble vitamins, K2, which we've talked about at length previously. So, Well, I think people are learning.
Yep.
I've been trying for, 15 years to leverage people into a better position with knowledge and pushing and prodding and things with various nutrition challenges. I will say I feel like this has been one of the most successful. Yeah, so definitely. I've tried it lots of different ways. I'm glad this one seems to be sticking. Lots of people talking about it. I think that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Lots of knowledge, lots of horrified people. But one of the ladies said, I think you've changed our family forever. She's like, now that we know, like you can't unknow that stuff,
Yeah. And that's the whole thing, right? It's like learning something so that at least you're aware of the risks that you're taking. And then again, this isn't just like we'll do it for November and then it's like all bets are off. No, this is something that you're going to try to incorporate into your life moving forward.
Yeah. And however you incorporate it, it's responsible use with some parameters around it and finding the minimum effective dose for you. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I enjoy the conversations we've been having in the gym and I look forward to the rest of the month.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
See you in the next one.